And we are live. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Bigfoot Odyssey's Researchers Report. Got a very special show for you tonight. Our guest host, creator and host of the Bigfoot Dogman Research Project and the Cryptid Files on YouTube, seasoned field researcher and my friend, Mr. Dee Doss. Welcome, Dee.
Thank you, Kerry. It's an honor to be filling in your shoes momentarily, and it's even a bigger honor to get to talk to someone who you all know, someone who's inspired me as a field investigator, Mr. Scott Carpenter, my fellow brother in Christ. Thank you for being with us, sir.
You're welcome.
Yeah, let's bring Scott in. Author of the Bigfoot Field Journal and the Nephilim Among Us, and you can find those in the description after this show. Mr. Scott Carpenter, thank you for being with us here, Scott. We surely do appreciate it. And be sure to check out the Paranormal Gift Shop. Link for that will be in the description of the video after the live show. They've got novelty items, t-shirts, hats, and thousands of other gift items from UFO to Ghost to Bigfoot and many others. Act now because for a limited time at the Paranormal Gift Shop, you can use promo code Bigfoot Odyssey 5. That's Bigfoot Odyssey, no spaces, the number 5, and receive an additional 5% off your purchase. All right, before we get started, we'll remind everyone in the chat, please keep it clean. We got our moderators in there. All we ask is that you be respectful and no swearing. We appreciate that. All right, Dee Doss.
All righty, here we go. Mr. Scott Carpenter, author, prolific field. I mean, you're an innovator in this field. And that's why I'm happy to talk to you. We just had a conversation off air, and I want to kind of jump back into that.
Sure.
You have one of the most fantastic pieces of dogman evidence, not only dogman, but what I call one of the physical and spiritual elements of it. You actually captured that on film. This dogman had an alien-looking being riding on its back, and the clarity of this piece of evidence is phenomenal. So if you could expand upon that and that experience walking through there for the folks.
Yeah, like we were talking earlier, you know, I'm not a dogman researcher, but these things just kind of showed up. I had more than one experience. But what was going on with when I captured this footage? Of course, I had my back trail camera on, and I had walked down a narrow path, and there was a little island that set off. There was a roadbed actually that went between the mainland and this little island. It used to be a ferry station, and the water was probably about knee deep. So I was really concentrating on that island and checking that island out, and with my camera going in and out, zooming in and out, and I didn't know it, but like in the footage behind me, that this dog man with his little entity on his shoulder side of his head, sneaks up behind me, and as I go to turn my shoulders, that's when I get the footage. It's when I actually swing the camera towards the brush, and he does his little thing, and then the ducks out of the way, and then I move on. But I was telling them that usually there's a Bigfoot around, I get a certain feeling. I can feel when they're around, but this thing was odd. It was a different feeling, and I really didn't know. It was so odd. I really didn't know the thing was that close to me. And once I got home and saw the footage, it really shook me up for a little while, because that thing was crazy close. And I think it was God's protection that kept that thing from jumping me, because it was literally. I do follow up. I've got follow up videos to it, and it was 3 or 4 feet. That's how close it. The camera makes it look farther away, but it was very close. And so it was crazy. And another thing, that little entity that was on it.
Absolutely. That was scary.
A local guy from down there who saw the video said, "Yeah, we got those things down here." He said that's called a flathead. That's what they call that type of dog man, the one that's kind of got a wider head and got like a pig snout. They call them flatheads. And he said that little being, he called it an apple sprite. And I said, "What in the world's an apple sprite?" He said, they like to hang out in fruit trees, and he said they got a real nasty disposition, and if you get too close, they'll throw fruit at you. And so I said, okay, if that's what so that was his explanation of what that thing was. But really not ever, other than that, no one's ever given me a good explanation of what that little thing is. So other than it's probably some sort of demonic entity, but other than that,
exactly.
I don't know.
And that's where you and I agree. and you kind of tackled it in Nephilim Among Us.
Mm-hmm.
You really went in depth with it, and it was you kind of casually mentioned it for the more advanced reader. And this is the book that I really suggest for everybody, the Bigfoot Field Journal. But pick them both up. Great books, great author. But I think we believe the same way, that a lot of this stuff, where I do believe personally that they are physical entities out there, some sort of a physical beast, a lot of this stuff that people are dealing with is deceptive in a way. And yeah, I don't know of anybody who has expanded upon that like you have. You know, how it'll draw you in and get that interest going.
Yeah.
And they'll follow you home, you know, and there'll be poltergeist activity associated with it. That's not a physical beast.
That's exactly. Well, that's kind of, you know, I take the Nephilim Among Us is kind of my final conclusion and what I came to. I mean, when I first got into this, you know, like the Bigfoot Field Journal, you know, like everybody else, I started off, there's that natural progression. I started off with, it's a bipedal ape. And then the next, you know, as I began to learn and things happen, okay, it's not a bipedal ape, you know, because I had actually saw one. So now, you know, it looks very human. And then, of course, with David Pilates, who's a research partner, you know, his books, Tribal Bigfoot and the Hoopa Project, you know, where they did the sketches, you know, extremely human looking, or, you know, very human looking. And so then I kind of made the thing, okay, now you know, there's some sort of, you know, maybe a missing link or whatever. And then we go into the DNA study where they come back where they're half and half. Their, you know, their mitochondrial DNA is human and their nuclear DNA is really exotic. And then you start having, like you said, you start having the paranormal. The woo starts to happen. The orbs show up. The cloaking starts. The unexplainable single footprints. They follow you home. You know, all this, and you know, and then when all that started happening, I'm like, whoa, you know, and you know, I'm logically looking for answers, because I'm like, obviously, you know, this thing's not, you know, fully human, you know, and it can do things that, you know, what can do these things. And so when I started actually broadening my research, you know, I got into the L.A. Marzulli stuff as far as, you know, his stuff about the Nephilim, and Rob Skiba, and started doing some serious research. And I started seeing the correlation, and then talking about how the Nephilim had the diaspora, and how most likely, you know, or not most likely, they came to the Americas. You know, this was just kind of like one thing led to another. And then, you know, over a series of years, you know, I came to the conclusion, you know, that it's in the Nephilim Among Us that the Bigfoot is a Nephilim. It is a descendant of the Nephilim, because it has those characteristics. It actually, and I lay it out in my book, how they have very similar characteristics and have angel-like abilities, and they have knowledge. I think they know about the ether. They know about the sound vibration and how the universe works more than we do. And so they're able to, number one, manipulate it and use it. And number two, I think they have genetic abilities, you know, angelic genetic abilities. So they're kind of a half in, half out type of creature, where they can, you know, they're not totally human and they're not totally angel. And so, you know, and depending, you know, I guess my opinion is that depending on how purebred they are, so to speak, is how you know, the kind of abilities, because you'll hear, you know, somebody shot one, you know, they get shot and nothing happens. They jump off a 150-foot cliff and they walk away from it. And then you hear about one that Granny runs over and kills. So, you know, that I'm thinking, okay, well, how you explain that? And of course, you know, if you look at genetics and crossbreeding, and if it's a genetic trait, which I think it is, then probably some are not as gifted or have as, you know, are not as purebred as others. And so that's where you have your disparity. But for the most part, you know, I think that, you know, that's how I came to the Nephilim conclusion, and that it's a spiritual thing. And I don't want to get to the end point, but where it really hit home with me was, you know, we had some people call us. People always reach out to us because, you know, the police don't take people seriously, right? You know, still, you know, police and wildlife and all this other stuff, they won't take people seriously if they call and say, "Hey, I've got a Bigfoot looking in my window. Please come out here and help me." The police will put them off to the wildlife agency, and the wildlife agency will ignore them or laugh at them. And so they call through David, or they'll contact me. But we had a woman out west that was having a real serious issue. And usually if you tell them people to put up cameras, anything night vision, anything that's got passive infrared, they don't like. Of course, one of the rules is we're not going to get our picture taken unless. So you put that up and do motion sensor lights and the cameras. That usually takes care of the situation. They usually just move on. Well, this Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Nephilim, he was a tougher one. He broke the cameras. None of that worked, and he was being invasive. She would call and she'd say, "Look, they're trying to get in my head. They're in my head, and I want them out of my head." She lived in a camper on some property, and they were shaking the camper and beating on it. And so I finally said, "Look," I said, let's try rebuking in prayer. And I said, "I want you to pray. I want you to rebuke it." And I said, "I want you to go out and read your Bible."
Amen.
And she did that, and it immediately stopped. And she continued to do that for about a week, and it finally went away and left her alone. And she's never contacted me back. So I make the assumption it's never bothered her again. And when that happened, that's when I knew I'm dealing with a spiritual being, because if this thing's not spiritual, it's kind of like if a 800-pound grizzly bear is bearing down on me, unless the Lord's going to send an angel to save me, I try to rebuke it, it's going to eat me. Okay. But if you got an 800-pound Bigfoot bearing down on you and you rebuke it and it leaves, obviously it's a spiritual thing. It's a spiritual component. It's angelic. You've got enough, angel in it. It's demonic. It has to obey.
And not only a spiritual thing, but just like you said, it's demonic.
Yeah.
And this is the only difference that you and I have as far as our research. I believe there is a physical creature and there is some spiritual being out in the woods, occupying the same space.
No, I don't disagree with that.
And I don't know, but I use you as an example a lot of the times. You have put forth the most reasonable argument as far as these things being of a spiritual nature and being of a demonic nature, because you can't rebuke an angel in the name of God Jehovah or our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. It just won't happen, because that's who they serve.
Yeah.
So, I've dealt with a lot of people who ran into that, and I've also dealt with people who are dealing with some sort of a physical beast, and that's why and I've started referring to the ones, especially down in northern Texas and southern Oklahoma, as the beasts of the field, because they have humanistic type qualities and capabilities, but they're animalistic. Mm-hmm. And then in the same sparse parts of the woods and old growth forests, you have these spirit beings, and that's what I believe they are, because they don't abide by the laws of physical nature. Mm-hmm. And that's just cut and dry. And any researcher who's spent a prolonged period of time in the woods has dealt with it. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's people and that's why I respect you, because you've actually been forthcoming in the evidence that you've gathered. A lot of people will put that to the back burner and say, "Oh, well, I can't explain that. I don't want to put that in the public because they'll think this or that or the other thing." You've actually put out 2 books, one where you kind of alluded to this stuff, and the other one where you just kind of, expanded upon it and explained it through your perspective as a born again believer. And I respect that. But there is definitely a supernatural element going on out there when we deal with these cryptids.
I agree.
I want to say this. Yeah. I want to say this. We did our last travel episode in Nebraska with Omaha Reservation, Omaha Indians, red squatching. And we had about 5 hours worth of raw footage to turn into the 2-hour show. So this got left out. But Barry Webster said almost exactly the same thing you're saying, Scott. And he came to this conclusion on his own. He said he believes that these beings are born of evil, that it's an abomination, in other words. He believes it's the Nephilim, the half angel, half human, or whatever percentage is in there. And he said when they pray, it they started to come closer, and it was his belief that they were trying to get closer to God, like maybe to get back in God's graces.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, I mean, you're talking about an extremely spiritual person here,
Yeah.
and that didn't make it into the show, but he did talk about that a little bit. It didn't exactly fit really well along with the narrative, but you know, kind of the same thing that you're saying here. I mean, two different people, two different places. I don't believe he followed anything of yours, but maybe he did. I don't know. I know they did the, if you'll see the hair trap that we put up in that episode, it was your idea. And I asked Dennis, I said, well, he said, well, I can't remember the guy's name. And when we were filming, I said, you said the guy's name when he's Scott Carpenter. He said, well, I didn't want to say his name on your show. I said, well, it doesn't matter. You can say his name.
And that's what I talk about. You know, that's the innovative part of Scott Carpenter. Well, you know, because nobody thought of that. He introduced it. Look at him smiling. He know he did.
Yeah,
he introduced that to the field. You know what I mean? And everybody after that started using it because it works.
Yeah, well, it's just a keep it simple thing. You know, I'm trying to gather evidence, and I don't have any money. I mean, seriously, some of that was just, and you're trying to figure out how to pull the hair out, you know, and get the skin tags. So let me circle back around and the point that you're talking about. There's things out there that are totally, you know, spiritually demonic, you know, not physical, and then there are physical. I personally think we're dealing with a hodgepodge of things. And in other words, we're not just dealing with one thing. In other words, some of the Bigfoot are Nephilim descendants. And so they've got, you know, they're Nephilim in that sense. Then we have some entities that are totally spiritual. They manifest, they look like Bigfoot, but they, you know, they're the ones that, you know, totally walk into, you know, the stone wall and all that good stuff. You know, then you have, I mean, you got the dog man, the goat man, you got all these things that they had, you know, that were running around, you know, pre-flood. And then you got the orbs, you know, and so as far as origin of these things, I mean, I think some of that's original Nephilim lineage. Some of it's probably more modern fallen angel, you know, manipulating the genome. Some of it now, unfortunately, is human manipulation, our government or other, you know, Illuminati type groups doing their thing. And so, you know what I'm saying? It's like, and the wilderness is a place where they just let all this stuff go and it does its thing. And so, you know, that's the thing about it. You don't know, you know what I'm saying? It's just a hodgepodge. You don't know. It's almost like you don't know who created or how it created it or why it got here or how it got here. But, you know, the core thing is, you know, they're all satanic. They're, in my humble opinion, 98.9% of them are all satanic. And, you know, that's, you know, as I pointed out in my book, you know, if they're Nephilim, then obviously, you know, they don't have a human soul. And you know, it's a sad state of existence. Let me say that. I do have I'm not heartless. You can feel for a being that was created because of a sin of the fallen angels, and now they have to suffer the consequences of their fathers. You know, and that's to be damned from birth with little or no hope of salvation. That's a pretty awful state to be created in. You know,
absolutely.
And
for non-Christians, what Scott is saying is there was a great fall of all the creatures except for Noah and his family. If you read the Bible,
yeah,
and if you read the extra biblical text, there was a man named Enoch, and these giants who were creating these what we know as the Minotaurs and all these Cyclops, all these abominations in the eyes of God, all these mixtures of different creatures. If you read these extra biblical texts and different places in the Bible, there were these creatures that were created by these Nephilim that were mocking God. They were created to literally mock God. Exactly. God, the creator, God who planted the seed in Adam and Eve that we know now as human beings. And I do agree with that, Scott. I believe that's taking place now. I believe that the devil in all of his brilliance has used technology to create these hybrids, you know what I mean, in the human race as well as other things.
Yep.
You know, there are different places in the United States that use the human genome mixing with animals. That's an abomination in and of itself.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a sad thing to me. And like I said before, I'm glad that you actually stand up and point this out to people, because people in our field probably don't know about this kind of stuff. But if they pick up your book, you touch on a lot of that, and in your interviews, you do.
Yeah. Well, I'm not afraid of the gospel. I'm not afraid to talk about it. I mean, I think people need to know the truth. If they want to close their ears to it, my job is to deliver what I know and to tell the truth. And if that, a person wants to ignore that or say, I don't believe that, that's fine. I mean, I'm a live and let live guy, but I feel like I've met my responsibility, so to speak. I have told you, I've warned you, if you move forward, this is what could happen, and because,
Well, I've got a question. I got a question for you.
Sure.
For both of you, actually. Okay. If they're an abomination, whatever, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit off what Louisiana Swamp Ape asked. Some people have positive experiences with these creatures, with some of them.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that they're all bad? They're all evil? Do you think some of them can be good? And I mean, how do you think that works?
Well, I've struggled with that, because when I first made my conclusions, I kind of came down, well, they all got to be bad. But as I started studying the Bible, there were the lion men. David had his lion men, and if you read the Bible, I believe those were Nephilim. They were true, some sort of hybrid. They chose to follow David. Okay, so they had a choice, and they chose good. They had to be, or David wouldn't align with them. So. And if you'll notice, when God gave the Great Commission, or Jesus gave the Great Commission, he said, go and preach the gospel to all creatures. And that's not a quote of that, all creatures. And that started all creatures. Why didn't he say all people? Why did he say all creatures?
Amen, amen, and amen.
So, and here, the bottom line is, only God knows which ones can be redeemed and which can't. And so, and also you've got to look at, there's deception in there too. But if you think about it, at what point, let's say you've got a group of Nephilim and they're crossbreeding with humans and been crossbreeding for 200 or 300 years, at what point does their offspring tip the threshold and become, what I'm saying, have the soul, what God would consider a savable soul? So we don't know that. So
Kind of a sins of the father type situation.
Yeah. And so in my opinion, I treat them like this. I'm going to make the assumption I don't trust them, and I'm going to stay hands back from them and not seek them out anymore, not actively go out and, try, because, what it invites in. But that doesn't mean 100% of them are bad. I mean, that's the best way I can answer it. Only God knows, but you can't talk to them. And there's rule sets that allow them to really communicate to you. So your best bet is L.A. Marzulli likes to say, rebuke first and ask questions later, so to speak.
Right. And, Brown Dwarf just made a good point. He said, so maybe it's God's work for us to expose this information.
Yeah.
I believe that. And my answer to that question is, and Scott Carpenter, he's in the top 3 of, like I said, if I was a superhero, I would be one of the ones that came after Captain America. Scott is Captain America. You know what I'm saying? Like, he came before me. He's one of the ones that paved the way for people like me. And Brown Dwarf, and I know there's a lot of other independent researchers in the chat, I know they would agree, because he's an innovator. We talked about the double-sided tape. He can write that off in his humility as being just something a redneck would do. But the man's a thinking man, he's intelligent, and he's my brother in Christ. That being said, I believe, and this is what I fully believe, and I agree with Scott, that there is a crazy amount of deception going on out there in the deep brush for those of us who seek this stuff out, because we're seeking it out. We give our attention to it. And if you're giving, and there was a 12-year-old little boy, I'll never forget. He said, if you're giving more attention to this than you are giving to God, that there's something wrong. So there's a lot of room for deceptive means and schemes to come in play. But I do believe that there is a beast of the field, some physical creature. I believe that they're extremely rare. And I believe that there's some spiritual being. And when we talk about spirit beings, going back to the Bible, there's something that can become physical and non-physical, ethereal and non-ethereal that comes into play that pushes that deception. So all in all, my opinion on what you asked is that there is absolutely something out there that is looking to trick people. That's the stuff that's following people home. That's the stuff that's creating poltergeist activity. When you see something that's supposed to be akin to a bear or a mountain lion, a physical creature, you're not going to have saucers thrown out, or plates thrown out of your cabinets. That just won't happen. It doesn't happen with a grizzly bear or a cougar or anything else natural, any other creation of God. So why would it happen with this creature? That's deception, clear cut. And that's why I do what I do. That's why, I'll try my best to follow in Mr. Carpenter's footsteps, is to expose that. That's our job as Christians, to expose the truth. Yeah. And as Forrest Gump would say, that's all I got to say about that.
I can relate to that.
Well, all right.
Scott, I look forward to this interview all week. There's one thing I wanted to ask you.
Sure.
When Miss Ketchum, who I believe didn't get her fair shake in this community, I'll just leave it at that.
Mm-hmm.
When she approached you to help her with the project she was working on, that would have benefited everybody, and that has benefited everybody who actually looks into that research.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what was your first thought from one field investigator to another one? Like, what was your first thought when she called you and said, "Hey, I've seen what you've done. I know that you know what's going on out there. I need your help"?
Well, she didn't actually approach me. It kind of, the full story, which is in my new book, the Sasquatch DNA study.
New book, Truth Denied.
Yeah, new book, shameless client. What is it? Shameless plug. Anyway.
Shameless plug.
Yeah.
Truth Denied by Mr. Scott Carpenter, prolific field investigator.
But no, basically what it was is my affiliation, or me getting involved in the study, was through David Pilates, North American Bigfoot Search. I joined his group. It's a very, I got to a place where I was like, I need some help here as far as just having some people with experience that I can bounce ideals off of and talk to. And of course, I didn't want to do BFRO and all these other large groups. And I had just I read his 2 books, and I just had started sending him emails, and I'd started sending him some of the stuff I was getting, and it just kind of, that relationship just kind of developed. And then even before I was in he asked me to join his group NABS. He had already said, "Look, we've got this DNA study going on." He said, "Can you please collect some samples for me?" And I said, "Sure, I'll be glad to do it. I mean, it's exciting. We can finally, I knew, he said, he kind of told me the basics. Dr. Melba Ketchum was doing the testing, and he gave me, where the address to send the stuff and how I should handle it, et cetera, et cetera. And so, and then, you're talking about the tape and everything. That's kind of how we came up with the tape, because David's like, "Look, they just found out that hair with no skin tag, it won't yield DNA. There's something strange about Bigfoot hair, and so if it doesn't have a skin tag, they can't get DNA from it." And so we kind of brainstormed, and so we kind of came up with a way. Well, I figured, packing tape is good and strong. We can get them. We can find a way to get them, to come in contact with it. Then we can pull the hair out, by the roots. And so that, but, as I got, into the study, and I did start corresponding with Dr. Ketchum, she's a Christian. She's a strong Christian. And, it came natural to me. It wasn't any big deal. It was just a natural progression in what I'd already been doing. And I think God was God was just kind of, pushing me. I mean, I got into this, because of an experience, fishing, and I literally just thrust myself out in the woods, and I think God's hand was on it. He was keeping me safe. He was, and it was just like, you can kind of see how he led me here, and then he led me to David, and then David got me, into the study, and the study led me here. You can just see the different points connect, and so that's how I, long story short, that's how I got involved, and to me, it was just a natural progression in my research. Hey, we finally, we've got someone who wants to test, and it's got a study going, so that's kind of how I got involved. Is I'll be more than glad to send in samples.
That's awesome that you would say that, because looking at your career, I would absolutely tell somebody when they say, hey, who's Scott Carpenter? What has he contributed? I'd say, well, first of all, he's an independent field investigator who God has had his hand over the entire time that I've seen him out in the public. Because going back to the first thing we talked about, you were so close to that, what people would call the dogman being, with that alien looking figure on top of it. Mm-hmm. There's no reason it shouldn't have reached out and grabbed you, because looking at it, just looking at that photo, it was nefarious. You know what I mean? How else could you explain? You can explain that as a natural creature, because this being on its back almost looked like it was wearing a shirt.
Yeah.
So that's Scott Carpenter to me, and I sincerely appreciate everything that you contributed to this field. And like I say, there is a spiritual element to it, and that's why I was eager to interview you. You are somebody who knows in depth what's going on out there, because you've invested the time and the resources to do a full investigation as it should be done. And on behalf of everybody listening, I appreciate you for that.
No, thank you.
And check out his new book, folks, with that shameless plug. What is it again? Tell us, Scott. There it is.
The Truth Denied, the Sasquatch DNA study. And it's basically it's the study from my view. It's not like a biography of Dr. Ketchum or anybody else. It's my view of the study, what happened, when it happened, and all the stuff that surrounded it. Everything's kind of a background. It's kind of, I wasn't like, when I say I wasn't part of the team, in other words, I wasn't a scientist or whatever, I was a contributor, but, I was involved enough with David and had enough information, and then developed a friendship with Dr. Ketchum, Melba. So, I had some inside information and kind of knew not all of it, but knew a lot of it. And so, and then, through research and talking and interviewing everybody else, I've kind of put this book together. So, because I get asked all the time about the DNA study, you keep, right now it's the way the mainstream does it, the book or the study's ignored. That's what you do. You just ignore it. You don't mention it. And so you'll watch a History Channel thing on Bigfoot or whatever, and they'll always say there's never been a serious, they'll always say serious DNA study done or whatever. And of course, that's just not true. And the few times I have gone to speaking engagements and done stuff, I get a lot of people come up to me and ask about the DNA study. And I get a lot of emails, was this thing legit? What's going on with this? I hear every time if you Google it, the top 25 articles say Mel is a quack and it was all a bunch of garbage. And so I felt led and that this book needed to be written so people could actually see what happened. That there was a study and it was systematically attacked and then buried. And so,
And of course it was, because, the mainstream, whoever it is, this non-entity, that controls every piece of information that goes out, they don't want your kind of studies. They don't want what Scott Carpenter's actually captured out there in the woods. They don't want Melba Ketchum, who has all these accolades before she came into this field. They don't want legitimate, serious people telling the truth. So, of course, they're going to use everything they can to bury it. So, folks, Truth Denied is the name of that book. Go and get it. You got Scott Carpenter, who's an independent field researcher who gave his non-objective third-party opinion on all the goings-on of that. Truth Denied is the name of that book. Scott,
I don't know if I'd call it non-objective, but
you are a very opinionated man, and that's another thing I appreciate.
I may study. I need to say that I support the study. 100%. I believe it. So, you know, I'm not being, when I say objective, you could say I was, you know, from a field, you know, researcher's point of view, but no, I'm
a field researcher's point of view that was actually invested in the study and who actually contributed to it.
That's correct.
You're right. I apologize. That's really not a non-objective. That's not a non-objective approach.
No, if you read the book, you'll see how non-objective I am.
Awesome. I can't wait to read it.
Well, Scott, we do have a few questions in the chat here.
There we go.
I kind of prompted everybody to go ahead and start asking.
Sorry, Mr. President. And ladies and gentlemen, it's coming up in 2020. The president of the Bigfoot community, my vote's going towards Carrie Arnold, Miss Linda, the beautiful Linda Arnold as his first lady. They got my vote. I hope they got yours too.
And where can they go vote, Dee?
Yeah, Dee, that's what I want.
I'll make that up later. Go ahead. Go ahead, sir. Thank you.
That's what I thought. All right. Well, let's see. This question was from, oh, come on, Carrie. I lost it.
Well, while you're looking for it, I have something. Okay, when y'all were discussing the religious part of this, Bama had said that in one part of the Bible, it says, 1 drop of human blood, you are redeemable. And it does say that. I believe it's in Hebrews in the first maybe 10 to 15 chapters. Mm-hmm. I just, in my heart of hearts, I've said it before, I don't think any one species is all evil. I think there's good and there's evil. So,
yeah. Well,
I just want to say that
things are possible through Christ. So, I mean, God can do anything. He could even, change them where they, so, I don't disagree with that. It's just, it's one of the things that, as a human being, when we're born, that we're protected. The Holy Spirit protects us because we're human, and it doesn't allow for demonic possession or control until we reach an age where we actually have to, unfortunately, invite it in. People actually invite it. But, being these things being Nephilim, they don't have that protection. So they're more, I guess the thing you could say is they're more open to be influenced or possessed or, used by Satan. That's what I'm saying. Because they don't have that protection like we do.
Right. And I agree with you. I don't believe you should trust anything, but there's human beings we don't trust. So I do agree with you totally on that.
All right. And as much as I love Scott and everything he's done, I don't necessarily agree with the Nephilim aspect of it, not in all of them. And whoever Alabama Mama or whatever the name was, I'm glad you asked that question. And this is just my humble opinion from, my experiences. I do believe that you're right. When Jesus comes back, every knee shall bend, all above the earth and below. So that's, every creature it talks about. I do believe that there is a creature, which means there is a creator behind that being out there. But and to expand on what Scott said, there's just way too much deception for me to trust if this natural creature is one of these spirit beings or a natural creature. I'm not going to put my life in their hands. I'm not going to trust them. And that's just me. I can't explain it any better than that. I do believe that there is a massive deception going on, and it's a wicked thing. But again, I say that there is some physical beasts. They may be extremely rare, and there's these demonic spirit beings piggybacking off of their the alluring nature of them, the people that want to see them. But I don't know. That's just my opinion. Like, I haven't spent nearly as much time as Mr. Carpenter has out in the field. I don't want to, you know what I'm saying? I don't want to,
I got a question for you, Dee Doss. Why can't we see you?
Why can't you see me?
Who you hiding from?
Well, I'm not hiding from anybody. I just don't want to subject you to my ugly face. I have a face for radio.
Whatever. All right. This is from, and Dee, you kind of touched on this a little bit. Pamela, I hope I'm not butchering this too bad, Pamela. Viray, do you think there are infiltrators in this field, such as government, Illuminati, trying to mislead? Now, I think we already pretty much know that there is some entity out there putting out disinformation, misinformation. Who do you think it is, Scott? What do you think is going on?
I definitely think there's misinformation. There's trolls. you know, trying to muddy the waters. What agency it's from, who knows? I mean, some of it could probably be Department of Defense. Some of it could be the Department of Interior. I mean, the National Park Service has known about their existence for a long time. Their motivation's mainly money. You know, you can't come out and say, hey, yeah, by the way, we've got this, and you know, we've got these clans of indigenous creatures that, you know, roam the mountains that are, you know, 10 foot tall and, you know, look, you know, Bigfoot.
Come on in.
Yeah, come on in, spend your money, bring your children. You know,
come on in, have a picnic.
I mean, they're resisting emitting their mountain lions. You know, populations are growing here in East Tennessee, you know, because, you know, of fear of the park. I mean, the park's a big thing. In my area, the park is huge. It counts, you know, the Great Smoky Mountains is the most visited park in the United States. It's, you know, 13,000 jobs are related to it. 40, you know, almost $800 million, almost, you know. So, you know what I'm saying? That's, you know, even a 5% cut hurts. And so for them, it's a financial thing. And then I think for the other agencies, it's just, as long as they can keep, you know, people thinking I'm a quack and everything I put up's paranoia, they're happy.
Oh, we're all crazy.
Yeah, they're happy because, you know, it's all part of that bigger information management thing, you know, with UFOs and aliens and, you know,
Scott, you're a prolific author, and you've put out not only your experiences, but tangible evidence that have been accumulated into a project to expand upon a DNA study. You know what I mean? So they could say that about Dee Doss. They could say that about Carrie Arnold. But when you step out there, you can say, oh, well, what about this book I read and this project that I was associated with this woman of science who did a tangible DNA study that yielded results. They can say that about us because we're John, you know, John Q. Public, but they can't say that about you. And that's why I'm glad you're out there. You're one of the ones leading the way. You know what I mean? And I don't want you to retire. I know that you don't go out anymore, but I'm honored to actually get to talk to you tonight, and that you're actually spreading the truth. Yeah. Whether people agree with it or not, you're putting out tangible and real evidence.
I appreciate that. Yeah. Well, and one thing, go ahead.
No.
Oh no, I was just going to say, you know, just real quick on the DNA study. It wasn't just Dr. Ketchum. There were actually other scientists that were on the project. You know, from forensic scientists to, you know, there's, you know, it was a whole team effort. And she just, you know, of course, you know, she was the leader and she stuck her neck out. But these other people, you know, were real and they participated. So it wasn't just, you know, just when Dr. Ketchum.
It was just her name that got stepped on.
Yeah, well, they had to isolate someone and then discredit, and so they chose her.
Absolutely. That's exactly how we see it. Now, you know, as far as Lynn and I are concerned, we try to carry the naturalistic aspect of Sasquatch as far as we can, until we can't anymore. Until we experience the weird, strange, crazy things that we have experienced. Now, Cat NC1 asks, of the things you have experienced, have you experienced the mind speak that people talk about?
They have attempted to mind speak and I have resisted it. But yes, I have experienced it. They tried to get in my head and I just told them, get out. And I prayed for protection. Now, I don't know if you all have seen, you know, Les Stroud, who came and did the show here. You know, he finally fessed up that they mind spoke him when he was out in the area that I research in the Smoky Mountains. And so he's got an interview. I posted it on my Facebook, and he was actually given a radio interview, and he admitted it, you know, that they'd mind spoken. So
I have a question to that.
Sure.
And I've had 8 close encounters in the past 4 years. And other ones, you know, audible encounters or whatever anybody wants to call it. Like, why haven't they mind spoke to me? Am I a dummy? Because Carrie and Linda were out there with me. They seem to have a rapport with me. I've been in this area for the past 4 years. It's called Brown Springs. And I whistle when I go out there. Mm-hmm. And they'll reciprocate that. And it's got to the point where if they know that I'm out there, they'll mimic my whistle. Like, but I've never had this mind speak thing. You know, is it just that they like me, but they don't, you know, they like me, but they don't like me, you know?
I don't know. I don't think it has anything to do with like. They just don't mind speak you. I mean, you know,
I'm kind of glad of that, Scott, honestly, because I don't know if I can handle something like that.
It's an uncomfortable feeling for me. So I didn't like it. I mean, they don't try anymore, but early in my research, they were definitely trying. I mean, there were thoughts being put in my head, and there was they were trying to talk to me with an audible voice that was coming into my brain. And I resisted that. I told them no, I didn't want that. Now, you know, so
and see, that's why I don't know about that's why I separate the spirit.
Where'd you go, D?
I think he muted himself.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
You muted.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I accidentally timed somebody out, Gary Johnson. I apologize, Gary. I did not do that on purpose, buddy. My bad.
But what I was saying is, I think Carrie and I are on the same page with the physical. I really do believe that there's a physical creature out there that's extremely like advanced as far as, you know, their capabilities and their mind. And there's the spiritual aspect that occupy the same space. And it's just weird. And the only thing I can think about mind speak is I was in the cemetery in Brown Springs and I heard something whisper my name. Now, I believe that was something demonic because the feeling that was around, it was just uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable from the time we got there. But there's other times, like when we did the documentary when Carrie and Linda came down, and I didn't solicit this whistle, and they whistled literally exactly like I do. But I've never really had what people call the mind speak, where something's projecting thoughts or some sort of notions into my mind or a voice. And I don't want that. I know what you're saying. Like, I'm glad that I haven't had it. I'm not saying that I feel bad because it hasn't happened, because that's weird to me. You know what I mean? Now, I'm sorry that you had to go through it, because I know exactly what you're talking about. You know, it's either my voice or the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, it's
all right. We got my boys, Blue Line Bigfoot, and Blue Line Bigfoot is going to be on the show coming up either this month or early next month. And they said, any advice for folks trying to help someone with a pesky, mischievous, threatening Sasquatch?
Okay. Well, first of all, you do on the physical aspects of this, you can do go get some cheap game cameras, put them around your house, motion sensor lights. But if even more than that is the prayer and rebuke them. Pray, call on the name of Jesus to protect you. You say, I rebuke you. You cannot come around my house. You do not have my permission. I rebuke you in the name of Jesus. Leave me alone and stay away from me. In Jesus' name, amen. In fact, one guy was having trouble. I told him to go to the four corners of his property and pray that prayer. And so, and it worked. They don't bother him anymore. Especially if it's a pesky one and it seems to, in my opinion, it's always worked. The prayer and rebuking has always worked. So.
All right. Miss Diane Fowler. And we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but she makes a good point here. I know you heard about the little boy in North Carolina that was protected by the bear. I think everybody's heard that. So do you think the ones that protect children and coexist are not evil? Like the little boy rescued here in North Carolina.
I mean,
covered up.
Yeah, it's possible they did a good deed. Like I said, not that it's 100%, but I don't trust them. But I'm glad this one did a good deed, and this one protected the child. I mean, there are plenty of Native American stories where the Native American, they all considered them, to be a tribe, and I know they live in clans and have their own little social structure. But they may have actually done a good deed.
Right.
Yeah.
Now I know you've had these things follow you. You've had them. They've come to your house.
Yeah.
Something Tony Hill says here. Do you think they want anything in particular other than to just watch you, or you think they're after something?
I don't
it's hard to
know.
ask.
I mean, I can't. I think they're just like us as far as emotions. They have emotion, will, intellect. They're just big, hairy people that aren't quite human. So they have the whole range of emotions. Their motives, who knows? It's kind of like, it's like the ghost hunter thing where when they follow you, if you're not careful, they'll attach and follow you home. And so that's what they did. I think they were already coming into my town. I think once I invited them in, once I opened that door, and they spiritually knew, and hey, let's swing by this guy's house. And so that's what they did. I mean, they did take food. I mean, they took dog food for a long time.
That's what gets me, Scott. Like, why would a spirit being need to take something to sustain a physical being like dog?
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and that's something how can we answer that,
Well, I mean, but the Nephilim tribes were still, even though they had angel DNA, they were still corporal. They still had to eat, and they still, had physical needs. And so, I mean, they have, they still, they're not 100% one way, they're not 100%, or at least the ones I'm dealing with, are not 100% spiritual. Now, there are some things out there that happen that are, but I think they're a product of what they are. They're a cross. They're not 100%. So,
I know you've read the book of Enoch.
Yeah.
And how Enoch went to ask, this giant, this Nephilim, asked Enoch to go, because Enoch was God's man. He was like his, I'm a fan of gangster movies. They would call Enoch the consigliere. They asked Enoch to go to God on their behalf. And then Enoch said the first time, he was like, no, I'm not going to do that. Second time, he was like, yeah, okay, I'll give it a shot. And God himself said, no, they have no sort of, they're not getting into my kingdom, and they're not of me, so they don't, I can't damn them to hell.
Yeah, well, that was the fallen angels that were petitioning for a second chance. And God said no. And then he served a curse up on their children, that they caused a civil war, which is the clash of the Titans. And the first generation, he forced the fallen angels to watch this war happen and them kill each other. Now, of course, second and third generations, we're still on the earth doing their mischief, but the first generation, and then after they killed them, God put them, God basically put them in Tartarus, and threw them in Tartarus, for 4,000 years, and that's just about up. So
Tartarus and chains of darkness.
Yeah.
And as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the coming of the Son of Man.
That's right. So,
and I know you know that verse. And isn't that scary, bro?
Yeah.
What you and I do out there in the field.
Yeah, what we're seeing is just a start, I think.
I believe that as well. No matter what anybody wants to believe, the particulars of what they want to agree with or not, from one brother to another, a fellow Christian and a born-again believer, that's what scares me the most, is that one verse. As it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the coming of the Son of Man. And if we look at the elevation and activity of these things, you can't justify it being some natural creature. And I'm, like I said, I'm one of the ones that believe that there is some natural creature out there, what the Bible calls the beast of the field. And even if that is so, you can't justify the elevation and activity by saying that there is some physical creature out there. There's something else going on. What do you think about that, Scott?
Well, yeah, I think there's something else going on. I mean, there's the physical creature, and then there's the devil, Satan himself has got a plan. And, he's moving that plan forward, he's preparing for the end times. He's preparing for when he gets to be let loose, so to speak. And I heard one person say, and rightly so, about his breeding program. Well, 1/3 of the angels fell, 2/3 didn't. And in the coming, when he goes to battle with God, he's number one, he's facing a numbers issue. I think that's part of it. I think that's part of it. I think other part is literally deception, and
that deception, if even the very elect would be deceived.
Yeah, and he he wants to corrupt the genome. He's a counterfeit, correct? So God created his creation,
right. Yes, sir.
so that Satan's making his creation, right? So he's making these creatures after his likeness.
Right.
So
And he's not a creator. He's an imitator.
Yeah, some of this may just be Satan's, insane desire to counterfeit God and have his own creation. I think for a motive for all this to happen, that's probably, for Satan, that's the motive. Now for other people, there's all kinds of other motives, there's the governments and stuff and super soldiers and all this other good stuff that's going on. And then there's eugenics and there's people wanting to modify DNA so they can live forever and et cetera, et cetera. So, what I'm saying? There's all kinds of different motives out there, but I think the main one is just Satan's plan to counterfeit God's, what God has. So he wants to make his own creation, which would obviously be, some sort of, half breed human,
Something demonic, something that doesn't have God's hand in it.
That's right. In other words, God, God created us, so the only way Satan and his angels can create, is to, they can't create out of nothing, but they're using humans to try to create their beings in their likeness.
Yes, sir. I think the Hebrew word is bara, come into being, that which is something from nothing. Yeah. Only God can do that.
That's right.
But,
God,
like you just said, I couldn't say it better. The devil's a counterfeiter, and he can't bring something that is nothing into being.
Yeah.
He has to manipulate and counterfeit. Mm-hmm. And the scary thing is, you got CRISPR, this machine can use human DNA. It's already legal here in the United States, in England, and other places, India. They can use human DNA and mix that with animal DNA, and nobody can do anything. It's legal on the books.
Yeah, there are people
allowed to do this abominable stuff.
Wait, we're coming up on the end of our hour, but there is something I want to touch on. Several people ask about Woodbugger Farm, Michael Ward, and I was wondering myself. I'm not going to read their question specifically. I'm just going to expound on it a little bit.
Sure.
The Joyce Carter, Mary Green's 50 years of Bigfoot, Fox. I know you got that image of Fox standing in that ditch, and I can't remember how deep that was there. But several people were asking about it. First, how tall do you think he was there? And what are your thoughts in general on the whole thing?
Oh, well, he was down in the ditch. That's a ditch. He was just looking up over the ditch line. That ditch is 7 or 8 feet, if not more, deep. That's the grown-up ditch line that's behind the house. And if you read the book, and they literally use that ditch line all the time.
Right.
And later in the video, the guy actually goes down. There's a place where it's cleared, and you can see, he goes down and across it into the cow pasture. But it's a pretty deep. So, Fox was supposedly somewhere around 10 feet, 11 feet tall.
Right. So he could have been squatting down a little bit, possibly. I mean, I'm sure he didn't. I think it was down in the ditch line, looking up over the ditch. Kind of definitely an incredible, excellent image.
Yeah. And Mary and them, I knew Mary Green. I got to know her, last few years. She's a good Christian woman, and you talk, if you want to talk about pioneer, she was doing the research in a long time before I was, and she was finding out a lot of stuff. She had a bunch. She gave me almost every hair sample she had collected, and a lot of them ended up in the, I passed on to the study. So, as far as behavioral things and how they behave, Mary Green was definitely out there in front of it.
Well, all right. We got well, all right. We're going to call the show, Scott.
Okay.
Man, we certainly appreciate you coming on. Would love to have you back. We we like to keep it to an hour, so keep them wanting more. So when you come back, we'll have plenty of other stuff to talk about.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we've reached the end of our hour. Our guest, Scott Carpenter. Make sure you pick up his new book. Of course, we have the lovely Linda and the president of the Bigfoot community.
Whatever.
Mr. Gary Arnold from Bigfoot Odyssey.
Just want to let everybody know, Wednesday, we're going to have at 7 p.m. Central, Researchers Report. We're going to have Gordon Niemeyer, and I'll be reading narration. We're going to be talking about that. And then next Saturday, I don't know, I talked to our producer, Ms. Danielle Aiolo, for this show. Does a wonderful job getting our guests. We've got Blue Line Bigfoot, Ron Moorhead's coming on, Bill and Sheila Tucker's coming on. We've got a lot of good guests coming up here. I'm not looking at the calendar and the schedule right now, but every Wednesday and Saturday, we do the live show. Our next travel episode, we're leaving July 3rd, heading to Kentucky to film with Mr. Rick Wells, Woodbooker Farm. It's going to be episode 10, Woodbooker Farm. We believe it's going to be our best one yet. We're really, really excited for it. And while I'm gone, Mr. Dee Doss is going to host the Researchers Report, which I have a little trepidation about because I know he's probably going to do it better than I do. But
I don't know about all that, but what I will say is this has been a privilege and an honor. Like I said, it's one of the founders of something that I love to do. A real field investigator, somebody who's established the thing that I love. Mr. Scott Carpenter, it was an honor getting to talk to you, sir.
Thank you. I'm truly humbled. I really am.
And I hope we get to do it again sometime soon.
I hope so too. I enjoyed it.
I was trying not to sit here and gush like and embarrass the hell out of you.
And our channel is called the BDRP. That's the Bigfoot Dogman Research Project on YouTube. You can also reach us at our Facebook page, the Bigfoot Dogman Research, whatever it's called. Mr. Scott Carpenter, ladies and gentlemen, make sure you check out his new book. I'm going to turn it back over to our lovely hostess, Miss Linda, and the guy who does most of the talking, Kerry.
Thank you, Dee. I appreciate that. Y'all be sure and check out Scott's books. We're going to have those links in the description, the Bigfoot Field Journal, the Nephilim Among Us, and the new one. What's the new one, Scott? I looked for your books online to get the links, and I didn't know you had a new one.
Truth Denied.
Truth Denied. That's about the DNA. So those links will be in the description. You guys can pick up those books, and be sure to check out the Paranormal Gift Shop. The link will be in the description at the end of this video after the live show. They've got novelty items, t-shirts, hats, and thousands of other gift items from UFO to ghost to Bigfoot and many others. Act now because for a limited time at the Paranormal Gift Shop, you can use promo code Bigfoot Odyssey 5 and receive an additional 5% off your purchase. Thank you, everybody, for joining us here this afternoon, and we hope to see y'all Wednesday. Good night.
Good night, y'all.